Hi, my name is Hitarth Pattani. I am a senior technical consultant at Adobe for content and commerce. Today we'll be talking a little bit about Adobe Commerce extensibility. Now, I know everyone kind of like thinks that, okay, what is new in Adobe Commerce extensibility? I think commerce extensibility is there forever, right? When I started back in 2014, I thought that, hey, let's start and look at the commerce and say, how we can customize things, right? Back then, hey, when I look at the architecture and I said, okay, wow, that's cool. I'm talking about when Magento was 1.6, where we had different ways to extend commerce and commerce features. So I kind of like think that, okay, hey, that is an extensibility for sure, right? Then why are we talking about Adobe Commerce extensibility today? And that is what my topic is. Today I'll be going over some commerce extensibility framework overview. So what is commerce extensibility actually is, key components, how you guys can achieve commerce extensibility, how you guys can start it with it. App development, that is one of the important things that, okay, as I said, extensibility has always been there. It's just that now we are looking at it in different lenses. So how it was there and now how we are looking at it in the Adobe Commerce ecospace, that's what we'll be talking about. Then there are a couple of starter kits that Adobe provides with the set of features in it already. So it's like a head start for you guys. And then lastly, we're gonna go with an AI-powered development tool, a tool that gives wings, to be honest, with an AI capability in it for you guys to build things faster and consistent in the extensibility framework. First one is Adobe Commerce extensibility framework overview. So what exactly is Adobe Commerce extensibility? It's a modern cloud native architecture. So when we talk about extensibility now, we are not talking about putting customization in commerce. Again, let me just come back a little bit backwards and kind of like explain a couple of other terms. There are terms about in-process and out-process in the new era of Adobe Commerce customization. Now, in-process means whatever code that we write right now to customize our Adobe Commerce or extend our Adobe Commerce backend, that is in process. We create modules, we create extension, composable extension, composerized modules, right? We write it within Adobe Commerce project. That is in process. When we talk about out process extensibility, and when I'm saying this is out process, that means that I'm not asking any developer or anyone to write anything within Adobe Commerce. Now everything can be done outside. And that is what we're going to be looking at, right? So when I say cloud native architecture, in this case, everything is cloud-based. There is no customization required within Adobe Commerce. We can do most of the stuff outside Adobe Commerce. It's designed for decoupling, as I mentioned that, okay, hey, there is a commerce backend, commerce core, we're going to sit in a different cloud space versus, like your customization within other workspace. And front end is kind of like, again, headless, so it's kind of like, it's going to be its own cloud instance. Mainly how we can achieve extensibility. So there are two main tools that we can use to build out process extensibility. One is Adobe App Builder. That is a main tool that we use to kind of like customize our Adobe Commerce moving forward, especially in the out process concepts. And the Adobe I/O platforms, which is an Adobe Events. Basically, it's just like a cloud-based events that can be published and processed outside commerce. some key principles about extensibility, right? What it is, it's upgrade safe. You know, you don't need to worry about upgrade hurdles. Like when we talk about Adobe Commerce upgrades, right? When Adobe comes up with a new version, like, okay, hey, this is 248 now, and you guys are on 244, and now client is worried that, okay, it's lots of money involved in, and time involved in upgrading Adobe Commerce instance with lots of customization in it, so there are lots of conflicts. It's upgrade safe because we are not touching Adobe Commerce core code. Now everything is running out process. Doesn't sit within the Adobe Commerce instance, so it's upgrade safe. It's event driven. It's some events are, some business actions within Adobe Commerce are event based. So you just receives an event in IO events and process it without writing a code within Commerce, right? It supports all this Commerce lifecycle events, whether it's adding a product to place order and the post-order processing as well. API first approach, again, it supports REST, GraphQL. You know, we just have the communication with this APIs, talking, each and every services talks to each other with APIs. So if you are consuming commerce, if you are performing any commerce operations, basically you make the call to commerce with the REST endpoint. If you need some data in your processing within an app builder, then again you make the call to commerce to get the data. Similarly, if you need some things to be done within an app builder, within an Adobe Commerce, then you make the REST endpoint within app builder that hooks it into Adobe Commerce backend to just run the process. It's composable, as I said. You can tweak it as you want. Each and every component is kind of like plug and play. Commerce instances, basically in a different case, right? We have different flavors of commerce. But if I take an example of Adobe Commerce Cloud Services, right, and it's just a plug and play, right? There is an instance sitting outside customization. It's away from the customization. We can just plug and play with any sort of other services to make it work. This section is very important, how it fits together, how it works actually. So Commerce triggers certain events. Like Commerce has its own life cycle. When customer started his journey, right, it create a cart, and then customer views products and catalog, the full catalog basically. When they decide to actually purchase, right, they just made add to cart. Then all these events has triggers from Commerce, right? So it triggers either events, webhooks. That's the first step. Then the whole logic runs outside Commerce within an app builder. Then data unified through API Mesh. So that is the process the second point is basically completing the process when logic runs in the app builder. The third is basically data unified within API Mesh. So if you have different sources that you are getting the data from, now you do not need to write a customization within Adobe Commerce to make the call to the ERP system or make the call to any of the inventory system or product management system to get the data. You can simply onboard those endpoints within API Mesh as a different source and write a custom graph within an API Mesh so that you do not have to write the customization within Adobe Commerce. And at the end, if you wanted to extend your application, then you can do it with Admin UI SDK. Next, why we need extensibility, right? So it's mainly a shift towards a cloud native approach. Everyone talks about solution on the cloud services, right? So it supports a distributed architecture. It supports an API first integration, right? The next one is faster release cycles. Now we have seen that, okay, hey, there are lots of customization. As I said, you know, if you wanted to kind of like jump from 245 to 248, it takes a lot of time, and release gets a little bit delayed because, you know, like, hey, we are customizing core, and all the code that we need, it needs to be compatible with the 248 version or whatever the version that we are targeting to upgrade. Now, this with the cloud first and the app builder distributed architecture supports, you know, faster release cycle. So you guys don't need to worry about, you know, we don't need to worry about lots of upgrade hurdles and stuff like that. What's the problem in the in-process customization? So it's a tightly coupled, right? As I mentioned, again, I'm going back and forth about like upgrade issues, right? But it's tightly coupled with the core. There are upgrade frictions. Takes a lot of time, a lot of money for a merchant and for an SI to actually perform upgrades. So in process have those problems. Limited scalability is one of the other thing. Why out process? As I mentioned, it's event driven, it's decoupled, it's API based, run outside from Adobe Commerce, more resilient, scalable, and upgrade safe. So as this is basically some basic understanding of extensibility. Again, we are doing the same thing. We are customizing and extending Adobe Commerce, but in a different way, not in the traditional way that we used to do in process. Next up, there are 6 key components. Now, as I mentioned, that those were the 2 components that I talked about, the services that I talk about, Adobe App Builder and IO Events. Everything runs on top of it, but these are the 6 components, these 6 key aspects with which we can actually customize Adobe Commerce backend. App Builder, which is which provides a serverless functions. It's Apache OpenWhisk platform, which allows us to write code and customization for commerce. IO Events, again, it's an asynchronous event publishing and subscribing, consuming, basically. Webhooks, it's a synchronous operations. API Mesh, again, it provides a unified graph, can actually have a lot of sources in it, and we can actually define our own custom graphs. Admin SDK, as I mentioned, that it provides an extensibility in the backend, and observability. That is very much key important when there are things out process, right? Runs out process. Then we probably need to know what's happening on the server, right? So when events are getting fired or webhook gets fired and webhook receives the response, right? We need to know what triggers an event and what data we are sending and what data we are receiving. So observability basically tracks those information within Commerce. Now we're going to go each and every component one by one. I'm trying to actually make sure that like I go a little bit faster. But first one is App Builder. So what is App Builder? App Builder is basically a serverless platform, as I mentioned, that allows us to build custom application and integration and automation. It runs fully outside Commerce. It's a no code that is basically no core code change. It builds on Apache OpenWhisk, supports event-driven architecture and API first cloud native workflows. Where it fits, as I mentioned about those core components, right? Every core components that we use to extend Commerce features, everything will be built with this App Builder. So it receives Commerce events, it receives webhooks, executes custom logic in the serverless functions, calls Adobe Commerce APIs and external systems. So now no need to write a code in PHP, everything can be done with the App Builder. And why it matters, it definitely decouples the code from the core. How to get started? I'm pretty much sure that many of you might have started working with the App Builder, but I just wanted to kind of like go through real quick that how you guys can start it. So the screenshot that you see on the screen right now, it's a developer console. You have to go through just developer.adobe.com/console. That will be this, and you're going to see that if you track this box here, that is the option where you can start creating your App Builder application. Now in this screenshot, if you look at here, right, with the red box in it, you have to make sure that you select the right org for your apps to be created. So if you are working with multiple clients, each client will have its own organization, and you have to make sure that when you are creating your app, it has to be created within the org that you guys are targeting. Yeah, and then click on the option to create a new project with a template. Select an App Builder. Provide your project name and a project code, and then it creates an App Builder application. Now, next up is how to set up a local instance for App Builder. Now, if you look at the command here, which I said npm install g at Adobe/AI or CLI, basically this is the command that you require for you to install a CLI, Adobe AI or CLI tool to your local system. This is basically a tool which you will use to build, test, and deploy your App Builder applications. This will get installed globally, so on your machine. So once you install, you do not have to install again and again. Make sure that you use AI or login and log out to kind of like log in into a specific workspace. Make sure that you use this. Choose the right org with which you need that application to be created. Now, setting up the local instance, you still just, as I mentioned, there is an AI tool, right? CLI tool. With that, it provides a command called AI app init, standalone application with which you can just initiate your App Builder application. It looks like this, where you have all those directory structure. I know it's very small for you guys to read, but it just provides the full directory structure, full App Builder application. The right side is basically a serverless function. This is a plain generic template that App Builder starts with. Once you made the change, or if you wanted to kind of like run the application locally, you use AI app dev command, and then it spun up a single page application. This is basically native. There is no customization or changes that I have made. This is what it looks like when you do AI app dev, and it splits out the URL. When you click on the URL, you can see this view on the browser. At the end, and then again, this is basically serverless functions that I'm executing. So what I did is basically I selected run action, and then I invoke it, and it gives me the response in the result box. And then lastly, we can do AI app deploy. That will going to be deploy the application to server. Next up is I/O events. I/O events is a cloud native events that publishes and consumes through Adobe I/O, allows Adobe Commerce to publish a real-time business events. Or as I mentioned, that when add to cart happens or place order happens, if you want to send an order to your ERP, basically you can hook any of these events, and it can be consumed by any of the runtime action, and then you write the logic there. Enables an app builder to react on commerce activity without in-process code, and foundation of event-driven and out-process extensibility. How it works? Again, as I mentioned, Commerce detects a business action, and then Commerce publishes an event in the I/O, which is a cloud native. And then I/O routes these events to subscribe to App Builder action. Now, there are multiple options to the subscription. You can do webhooks. You can do App Builder action. So if you have an endpoint that you want to post those data outside your runtime action, you can do that as well with the I/O events. Why it matters? Again, as I said, it's a decoupled integration in the Commerce core. How do you get started with it? Again, you guys have to follow the same steps to create an Adobe App Builder application, as I mentioned earlier. On top of it, once you are done with the App Builder application created on the developer console, you might have a 2 workspace by default. It's a production and a stage. I am taking the stage as an example here. You just have to add some services to run the I/O events on your App Builder application. So select to add service, and then click on API. And then you have to select an I/O management API. That's the first service that you need to add to run the I/O events. And then you save the configuration with your OAuth server, so that hey, it's a way to communicate your App Builder application and your I/O events. Once you're done with onboarding that service, you still need 2 more services, because you can only add 1 service at a time. For I/O events to work within your App Builder application, you need to use an I/O management API and Adobe I/O events for Adobe Commerce. And there is an Adobe there is I/O events. There is one more service, that is I/O events. So those are the 3 services that you have to onboard for your App Builder application from the developer console. It's pretty straightforward. It's just adding those services on your workspace, and your workspace is now ready to consume I/O events from Commerce. Now, once that is done, you have to come back to your Commerce. Commerce should have IO events module installed. So if you are on 247 onwards, then you have those module installed within your Adobe Commerce, and that provides this configuration. So if you go to the configuration in the Adobe services with Adobe IO events, in the general configuration, you just provide your workspace configuration instance. You create your event provider. So if you have not created your event provider, you just click on that button to create an event provider. That puts the Adobe IO event provider ID into that text box, and then just hit the save, and now your Adobe Commerce will going to publish IO events when there is any business event happens. So let's say placeholder happens, right? It automatically transmit those events directly to the IO events. Now, it requires a little bit of a configuration. So as I said, like once the configuration is done, it directly publishes an event, but it's not that simple, right? You still have to subscribe an events. It's not publishing all the events that is happening in Commerce. So let's say if you just need sales order place after, or in this case, catalog save after, right? Catalog product save after, then you just have to subscribe it through CLI. Most of my examples are on the Adobe Commerce Cloud or a PaaS instance. If you are using SaaS solution, then you have a backend UI where you can subscribe your events. Once the event is subscribed, basically, you just have to register your event. So event subscription is done, then you just add the service, click on the Commerce events, provide your events with, select the registration, select the provider and select your event. So you can see here where the catalog product save after is been onboarded, right, on the developer console. And you just finalize your registration. So that means that now you know that, okay, hey, when the Adobe is publishing this event, where it's supposed to receive. So in this case, if you choose to receive those event data into the runtime action, then basically it triggers that runtime action when an event has been consumed. Yeah, I'm going to go through quickly onto the webhooks. Webhooks are basically similar with IO events, but what webhook does is webhook stops the execution on the PHP, and then it makes the call externally on the app builder with the REST endpoint, executes the OpenWhisk runtime action, and when the response has been received in Adobe Commerce, then it continues the execution based on the response received from the runtime action. It is used for real-time validation, synchronous making decisions. It's mainly when you need to validate some events. Let's say if you are placing an order, right, but you wanted to make sure that you are placing customer belongs to US or Canada country only, then you can just make that validation within within App Builder. And if you are throwing an error from the App Builder, then it just stops the execution within Adobe Commerce. I'm not going to go through this whole example, but basically the example is subscribing a webhook, creating a webhook within Adobe Commerce PaaS, and it is generating the description outside the Adobe Commerce and saves the data against the product entity. That's a workflow that how it works. I already shared webhook. So yes, one important thing of a webhook response, right? So as I mentioned that Adobe reacts the way that webhook is sending the response, right? So webhook is sending the response as success. That means that we are doing the validation, and validation is successful, so Adobe continue the execution. If App Builder is throwing an exception, runtime action is throwing an exception, then Adobe stops the process and it throws an error on those operations. There are other operations like add, replace, and remove, which requires a path of the object that needs to be replaced or add or removed from the object that webhook has been configured to. So if webhook is configured to catalog product save after, then if you say, okay, I want this path to be replaced with this value, then you just say replace. If you want an object that requires this one couple of other parameters, then you just use add. Or if you simply want to remove certain entity from your response object, then you just use remove. I'm not going to go again on API Mesh. As I mentioned, that it's a unified graph. Admin UI SDK is used to extend your Adobe Commerce backend. Observability, it's about your events, about your data, about your logs to be transferred to New Relic or any monitoring system that you are using. Again, this is a good comparison if you want to kind of like take the screenshot of it. It's a good comparison of what is an in process versus out process. Database storage, cron jobs, how you can do it in process and how you can do it out process. Integration starter kit, again, what is integration starter kit? It's basically if you have a backend integration, then you can just simply use an integration starter kit that is a ready built template on app builder application. You just install it, you set it up, and when Adobe fires an event for any of the entity like product, order, code, this application just receive it, and you just have to write a code to connect to your ERP, but most of the code is already been done. I'm not going to go through the overall architecture or installation steps, which I already have, but yeah, due to time limitation, I just wanted to kind of like go through that. Last point that I wanted to kind of like add before I conclude the presentation. Yeah, a lot of installation steps. I will going to share the presentation if you guys need for reference. Yeah, similar to integration starter kit, we do have a checkout starter kit where you can create your custom shipping method, custom payment methods, and text integration. So if you are working on any of the out process extensibility, use checkout starter kit. These are the references. Lastly, AI-powered development tool. So Adobe provides an AI tool that you can use to convert your existing PHP module into app builder application. So it has lots of rules. It also provides an MCP server in itself. So you guys just install it, set it up in your app builder application, and as soon as you use any AI client, then it is providing assistance to that. You can use any of these AI clients. And this is my last topic. This is how you get started. So AI Commerce Extensibility tool setup. That is the command to set your tool. And there are plugins that is required to run this command on the AI CLI. So that is the information. And I think that we're going to have, and these are the sample prompts. And lastly, this is the link. If you want to get started, this is the link. If you want to take the screenshot of it, this has all the steps that I have mentioned in there for your App Builder AI tool. And I think that's about it. Sorry, I had a lot of content, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Hitarth. Any questions from the crowd? Just so the example.
That's completely possible. So we have two ways to do it. If you are creating an app builder application, you have two runtime actions that comes by default. One is a generic runtime action, which you can see it's simple implementation, and another one is a publish event. That runtime action is a native runtime action that has an example how you can publish an event on the external system. So that publish event runtime action can be used as a webhook to the external system. So you just deploy that application, then that creates a runtime action endpoint, REST endpoint. That REST endpoint can be used as a webhook to your PIM system. So when PIM has some event to be triggered, then it can be triggered through this publish runtime action. there is another way that you can directly publish your event onto the I/O events. There is an API endpoint where you can directly publish your event from the PIM. It's simply again webhook you have to use for that.
Hey, if I understood correctly, there's a part where you can hook up the New Relic. I don't know if it's an integration, but how would that work? It's like an independent New Relic for measuring. It's like you're measuring monitoring the entire application and the application with the app builder or multiple app builder applications within a single New Relic account.
So that observability that I talked about, right? It's mainly for the Adobe Commerce SaaS component where SaaS does not directly come with the New Relic, right? So it has its own a log agent basically that they use, log services that they use, right? So this observability actually allows you to configure any of your log service basically for those external events that you are consuming. So let's say if you are subscribing for any events or any webhooks, then you can define within Adobe Commerce that, okay, hey, where you want that log to be forwarded to, because SaaS does not have a direct access to New Relic. So that's why that observability is there. It does that, yes, it does that a little bit. Yeah. So when you configure that, basically it also creates some spans in it. And traces in it, so that you can just measure that, okay, how much time it will take for that runtime action to runtime action. It's just measured. You might have to customize a little bit of it with the telemetry library with the Adobe. So there is a Adobe telemetry library, it's also there. You might have to actually install that in your app builder application and might create your own traces within traces. But yes, it's possible with the Adobe telemetry library.
Oh, all right. I think we should wrap up now. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Hitarth. And you all have a great day. Come see us at the Adobe booth. Hitarth will be there, and we can answer additional questions. Okay?
Of course. And if you want to talk, yeah, or connect with me, here's my information. Thank you.